Down here in the street, we have a lot of other important buildings. For example, the church here, which is in fact the German church here in Gothenburg. A church which has unfortunately had a bit of bad luck during the years. For example, you can see that the church tower differs a lot from the actual base of the church, especially in color. And this is actually because the German church has been a church which has burned down 3 different times. And after all of these 3 different fires here, the only part of the German church which has actually survived these fires is the clock tower itself. So you'll see a bit of a difference between that and the rest of the church there. But also a bit further up here on our right hand side, we'll see this extremely large building which is Gothenburg's museum today, but actually used to be a building where the East Indian Trading Company used to have their headquarters here in Gothenburg, and they were a vital part of the economics and trade here actually. I did quite a lot of trade between Gothenburg and China once, for example. But of course, now if we take a look a bit further up here on our left hand side, at the end of the street there, you'll see a very large yellow building with kind of red windows, and this is actually the residency here in Gothenburg. And now the residency in Gothenburg is in fact the building where all of the Swedish kings would live whenever they came here to visit our city. And as a matter of fact, it is still today the building where the Swedish king would live if he ever came to visit. And actually Gothenburg's oldest building left standing and was built back in 1651. But now we're also going to be passing under one of Gothenburg's lowest bridges, which is the cheese slicer. And if you want a slice of the weird humor which we have here in Gothenburg, then look only to your ceiling on your left hand side and you'll see, oh, it's a cheese slicer. Alright, but welcome to Gothenburg's harbour now, which is actually the largest harbour in the entire Scandinavia. Are part of the Maritime Museum here in Gothenburg, and as a matter of fact you might also see the highlight of the Maritime Museum, which is the very large grey warship straight ahead here with a submarine in between them. And now this grey warship is in fact the warship which is called HMS Småland, and this was a warship which was built here in Gothenburg to be able to withstand a nuclear assault once. However, it was only active until the year of 2001. Because what happened here in 2001 is actually that we had a very important visitor here in the city of Gothenburg. And back then, that was in fact the President of the United States during 2001, which was George W. Bush. And basically when he came here to Gothenburg on a meeting, he brought along his Secret Service, and well, you can say that him and his Secret Service didn't quite feel safe with the fact that we had the HMS Småland here in our harbour for the active. So what they actually asked us to do is, they asked us to disarm every single weapon on the entire ship. So we had to fill all of these cannons here with concrete actually, and since then the HMS Småland has been unusable basically, and has actually just stood here as a museum instead. also see a pretty weirdly shaped building straight ahead here on our right hand side, which is orange and red, and this is the Opera House here in Gothenburg, which was built in 1994, and the reason why it has these weird shapes is actually because, well, the architect said that he was so inspired by the harbour life here in the city of Gothenburg that he wanted to build something which would kind of resemble that. So you're supposed to see, for example, a ship and a pier and a couple of cranes in this building. But I have no doubt that none of you have missed the very tall white and red building now, straight ahead in fact, and this is of course the Lipstick here in Gothenburg, which is kind of like our very own Empire State Building if you look at it. And well, the Lipstick here in Gothenburg is a building which we're extremely proud of in our city, and recently we of course do have reason to be proud of the Lipstick because it was actually just recently in a contest, and it won the first prize of being in this contest, which was to be named Sweden's ugliest building. But you'll also see a very large ship here straight ahead, which is in fact a ship called Barken Viking. And now Barken Viking was a Danish ship back in the day, which actually used to sail between Europe and Australia for quite some time, until it later on ran aground just outside of the Netherlands and was stuck there for a while. When the Danes later on managed to retrieve Barken Viking, they did, however, they did realize that there was going to be some trouble, and that was the fact that, well, Barken Viking wasn't in the best condition, and they didn't really want to rebuild and restore it, so they actually sold it to us instead for 1 Danish crown back then. Now, when we got our hands on Barken Viking, we decided that, well, we're pretty good at building ships here in Gothenburg, so let's rebuild Barken Viking and build it better than the Danes ever could, with, for example, 55-meter high masts, which was very, very cool, but there was one slight problem with doing that, and, well, that is the fact that later on in the river here, before you can actually get out to the ocean, we have a bridge. And this bridge is in fact 45 meters high. So Barken Viking is instead stuck here in the harbour to this very day and works as a hotel and conference centre. Alright, but what you might notice now is the fact that we're driving by a very, very long pier here in Gothenburg now, which is in fact the banana pier here in our city, where the very first bananas arrived back in the day, and they came here all the way by boat from South Africa. And as a matter of fact, here in Sweden, we are in fact the top consumers of bananas in the entire world. And every Swede here in our country consumes about 22 kilos of bananas every single year. We are almost about 10 million people here in this country now, so quite a lot. Right, so what we have here on our right hand side now is actually the free port here in Gothenburg, where ships used to come in here to be able to trade with people in the city free from any taxes or shipping costs. But we're actually going to take a small detour into the free port here today now, since, well, there are actually a couple of cool ships here which are here because there was a tall ships regatta race. And now these ships, which you'll see here in just a moment, were actually used this week to be able to sail all the way from Blyth in England, which is on the northeast side, all the way from there here to Gothenburg actually. And this was a race where, well, one of the Swedish teams won actually, but you know, there are about 30 different ships which are all of a variety of length and size, and they're actually very cool. So we're just going to have a small peek in here and see what it looks like. But now, of course, we can take a look on straight ahead on our right hand side here, because you'll see something truly fantastic. I think you're gonna like this, guys. At first, you'll see the Swedish Television and Radio House, which is our public service here in Sweden. But beyond that, you'll see something that at first glance you might think that it just looks like an ordinary mountain, but no. As a matter of fact, this is not just any ordinary mountain. This is the Ram Mountain, which is Gothenburg's highest mountain, with a whopping height of 9,000 centimeters. What you might also have noticed a bit further up ahead here is all of these cranes which we have here in Gothenburg today. And now these cranes are actually what the last remnants of what was once Gothenburg's largest shipyard. And now Gothenburg does have a pretty extensive history with building ships. It's been something that we've done here for almost all time, ever since we founded the city, and until the 70s actually. We've always been pretty good at building ships here in the city, and what happened during the 70s, when we were actually one of the best cities in the world at building ships, was in fact that, well, the industries behind all of Gothenburg's different shipyards actually moved from cities like Gothenburg to places like South Korea and Japan. So what happened here in the city of Gothenburg is basically that all of these shipyards had to shut down very, very rapidly, and this was the largest industry in our entire city, and these shipyards basically covered the entire Hastings Island here on our right hand side. But all of these had to shut down very rapidly, and what you in fact see on your right hand side here wasn't only the largest shipyard here in Gothenburg, but also the shipyard which actually survived the longest. Now this is Gothenburg, which was open all the way up until year 2014 actually, but in 2014 even Gothenburg of course had to shut down a bit later on. And since then, well, this area has stood empty for quite some time, and actually we've had a lot of discussions about what to do with this very area, and recently we've decided now that we're going to start rebuilding Gothenburg here and start building houses here, so that a lot more people in the city of Gothenburg can live a bit closer to the water. So in a couple of years all of these cranes will actually be gone, except for one, however. There is actually one crane which will remain here at Gothenburg, and that is the crane which we have right in front of us now on our right hand side, crane 47, which will stand here as a memory of the time which once was here at Gothenburg, basically because a Swedish celebrity which used to live here actually bought this crane. Side, see actually what is kind of like a tower there among all of the trees with a golden crown upon it, and this is actually an old watchtower which was used here in Gothenburg called Skansen's Crown, and there are actually two watchtowers just like this in the city of Gothenburg. This one, Skansen's Crown, and another one a bit further down in the city called the Skansen Lion, which is basically the same thing except it has a lion on top instead of a crown. Now these two watchtowers were built whilst we were building the city here, basically so that we could have two watchtowers a bit outside of the city to be able to keep an eye on both the Danish and the Norwegian and know when they were going to attack us here in Gothenburg actually. You might also see a pretty large church there a bit further up on our left hand side here, up on that mountain there with a very large church tower, and this is in fact the Mast Chopper Church here in Gothenburg. And now the Mast Chopper Church in Gothenburg is in fact the church which was built in the district where we used to chop down trees, basically build masts and sell them to different countries like Germany, England and the Netherlands for example. However, the Mast Chopper Church was built in the early 1900s and actually stood finished first in 1914, where the very first use we had for this church was in fact to ring the bells and announce to the entire city that the First World War had just started. Also here on our right hand side we'll see one of the newest and most modern areas here in Gothenburg called Lindholmen, and now Lindholmen actually used to be just yet another shipyard here in the city, but when they actually decided to shut down the shipyard, we decided to rebuild this entire area into a very new and modern area, which is actually the most technologically advanced area in Gothenburg. One of the examples of the technological advancements here in the area of Lindholmen is the red and brown building which you see there on your right hand side, which is actually a building here in Gothenburg built on purely recycled material. It runs on solar energy as a matter of fact. side is the Denmark terminal, which belongs to Stena Line here in Gothenburg, where basically all of the ferries go from Gothenburg to Frederikshavn in Denmark. There are two ferries which take this entire route, and that is the Stena Danica and the Stena Jutlandica. And with these two different ferries, it takes about 3 hours to get all the way from Gothenburg to Frederikshavn in Denmark. And a bit further up here on our right hand side again, we're going to see the Stena Charisma, which is yet another ferry which actually used to go between Gothenburg and Denmark, but it stands still here today because they've actually decided to stop using the Stena Charisma. But as a matter of fact, this ferry is actually up for sale, so if any of you are looking for an interesting souvenir or just a stylish way to get home, I can definitely recommend just putting a bid and seeing what happens with this very boat here. You might also remember the fact that I told you about the foundation which we had here in Gothenburg and how it was so bad, and I would actually see an example of this in a building here in the city. And now, as a matter of fact, if you look straight ahead here, you're going to see kind of a pink building with a black roof and 3 different towers. Now if you take a look on the tower which is farthest to the left, furthest from us, this is, you might actually see that there is something just a bit off about this tower, and that would be the fact that it's actually kind of tilting to the side a bit. It's a bit easier as the closer we get, especially on the first floor there to see. Another reason, of course, as to why the tower is tilting that way is actually because what's happening here to this building is that it's built on such a bad foundation that it's actually sinking into the ground at a pace of about 5 millimeters every year. But now we're going to be passing under Gothenburg's lowest bridge, which is called the Hairdresser. And under the Hairdresser, it's very important that we are very cautious and that we all lean forward as much as we possibly can, because the Hairdresser does, of course, have its name for a reason, and that is, well, if you're not careful and you don't lean forward, you might just get a new haircut. So let's all lean forward as much as we can now, so that we can get under the bridge as safely as possible. And of course here's the hair dryer. But you might also remember the fact that I told you about the old city wall which we once built around the entire city of Gothenburg, and actually we're going to see one of the last remnants of the city wall. But the thing about this remnant is that it's actually still 7 meters high today, and we're going to see that on our left hand side just after the bridge here, so keep your eyes peeled in. There we have it, the very last piece of Gothenburg's old 7 meter high city wall. I was actually kind of thinking now that I would take this chance and ask you all guys for a small favor. So if you take a look here straight ahead, you're going to see this white building with a red roof on top. And as we pass by this building, I'm going to give you a countdown, and basically what I want you to do is just wave and look as happy as you possibly can towards this building. Is that okay? Alright, so let's do it in about 3, 2, 1. Let's all wave and look as happy as we can. You're having the time of your life now, guys, remember? Alright, thanks a lot. That's my boss in there, so just need... But of course, here on your left hand side, you'll also see a pretty strange building here, which is actually, well, the indoors fish market here in Gothenburg. And the story behind the indoors fish market is here that we liked buying and selling fish here in the city because of, well, of course, the location of the city. But it was pretty hard to do this outside in Gothenburg because we don't always have the best weather. So what we needed to do back then is actually that we needed to build an indoors fish market. And the city said that, don't worry, we'll provide you with one, and they hired in an architect. But there was one small problem with the architect, and that was, well, the fact that the architect they had hired in had only ever previously built churches. And he was maybe not the most creative guy in the world because, well, what you see there is actually Gothenburg's very own fishing church. But a bit further up ahead here now, you're also going to see yet another bridge which we're going to be passing under here in Gothenburg. But we can notice as we pass under this bridge is the fact that this bridge is standing on wheels here on our left hand side. And now, of course, the reason as to why some of the bridges here in Gothenburg stand on wheels is actually because back in the day we had a lot of traffic which needed to pass through these canals here to obviously be able to trade with the people in the city or to just drop cargo off at different places in the city. So what we needed to do back then is that, well, we still needed bridges because people needed to get over somehow, but what we decided to do is build bridges that would always be able to move whenever a ship needed to pass through here. So the simple solution we found was basically to put the wheels under the bridges so that whenever a ship needed to pass through here, we could simply just rotate the bridge, and then when the ship had passed through and people wanted to walk over again, we would just rotate the bridge back. And now back then this rotation was actually purely mechanical and demanded that very strong people were actually there and rotated the bridge itself with the help of some winches. But you might also have noticed the fact that we've been passing by a pretty long park here on our right hand side, which is in fact the King's Park here in Gothenburg. And now the King's Park is actually a park here in the city which was inspired by a lot of different British parks. So you might just see a couple of different similarities between parks like the King's Park, for example, and parks like Hyde Park and Regent's Park in London. And on our left hand side here, we're going to be passing by the vegetable plaza here in Gothenburg, where actually the ship used to dock down here in the canals and actually sell vegetables from this very spot, and it was extremely popular back in the day. But a bit further up ahead here now, you can see a very large white building, which is in fact the Grand Theatre here in Gothenburg, which actually used to be our old opera house until we built the new opera house back in 1994. Now the Grand Theatre works mostly as a stage for a variety of different shows today, and also on the ground floor there they have a couple of different restaurants with a very nice outdoor serving, which I absolutely would recommend. And you can of course see a pretty weird statue here on our left hand side now, which is the statue of Prometheus, who is a character in Greek mythology who, according to Greek mythology, actually stole the fires of the gods, which he's got in his hand there on his left hand. And of course, stealing the fires of the gods deserves a punishment, which was pretty apparent in the statue there. But with that said, that actually means that we're back here where we started, and actually at the end of our tour here now. So we're gonna dock here and just